Okay, welcome everybody. This is the training call for the First Tech Challenge scoring system for Rover Ruckus. On this phone call, we have Jeramie Vens, who is a fantastic Iowa volunteer, as well as Tom Eng from First, who has developed the software as well. This call is being recorded, so that way we can share it with those who were unable to attend. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeramie Vens. Thanks, Jeramie.
Thanks, Becca. So, as Becca said, I'm Jeramie. I've been volunteering at FTC Iowa for a number of years, and I'm going to walk us through the basics of how to run a league meet using the new scoring system that First has provided to us this year. So, to begin with, to actually get the scoring system, it's the same place as before. You go to the volunteer resources on the First website and scroll down to Scorekeeper, and there's a link here for the score system. This link is going to take you to GitHub, and from the GitHub page, click on Releases, and then you can download from the .zip here. It's about 70 megabytes, so it takes a little bit to download. I've already downloaded it. So once you download the .zip and uncompress it, you'll get this First Tech Challenge Live dash some version number. So it should be pretty straightforward to download. For the most part, that's similar to previous years. So here's where it starts getting different. Uncompress it. It does take several minutes to uncompress, so if it seems to be taking too long, I've seen it take up to 6 or 7 minutes on some lower spec computers, so it does take a few minutes to uncompress. You then can come in here, and there are two options. There's Unix and Windows. Since pretty much everybody in Iowa is probably running this on Windows, I'm just going to cover how to start it on Windows. Double-click the .bat. Most likely you're going to get some sort of warning saying that Windows is unsure whether this software is safe to run or not. I'm pretty sure we can trust First, so what you can do is click More Info, Run Anyway. If you're on Windows 7, the error is slightly different, but it's very similar. And that should start this console window in the background and open up whatever your default web browser is to localhost. For whatever reason your default web browser is Firefox, this does not support Firefox. You will have to open it in Google Chrome and manually go to localhost. One little gotcha there, if it doesn't start or if you're having issues, it's probably because you do not have access to port 80, in which case you need to start it at a different port number. And the way you can do that is come in here and shift right click, so that's press the shift key plus right click, and open command window, or in my case open PowerShell window, and then you'll start typing it. So you want this typed exactly as it is listed here, First Tech Challenge Live Windows.bat, and then add -p 8080. This will open it on port 8080 instead of port 80. 8080 is a non-restricted port, so that's more likely to work. I do believe there's discussion on fixing this issue, so this won't be a problem, hopefully in version 0.5.0, but just a little gotcha. So once you have successfully logged into the system, you'll be greeted with this page here. Also, Tom wants me to mention, make sure Windows Firewall and things like ad blocker are disabled. They could also prevent the software from running. That's a good point. And we should be okay because I believe every league was given one of Bill's laptops to use. So Bill's laptops, you should have admin privileges, and it shouldn't be an issue on if you have one of those. Once you're in the system, you can click on Login. The username is local, and there is no password. So just type local, no password here, and click Login. So now that you're logged into the system, it'll say hello local up here, and you have event admin up here. Click on event admin, and we're going to create a new event. So for this example, let's just say this is the test league. So we're going to say for event code test meet 1. This is league test meet 1. The Adele league, this would be Adele meet 1, etc., etc. There cannot be any spaces in this. It can only contain letters, numbers, and underscores. Event name, test league 1. This is going to be a league meet. Let's say that it's this weekend, end date this weekend. Number of fields will default to 1, which is the case for all league meets, and we'll create the event. Hopefully. Tom, is there a reason this is taking so long?
I'm not sure. Can you display your console window?
Sure. I don't see any errors in there.
Yeah, I also don't see any commits or anything like that.
I can try restarting it.
If you do, you'll have to log in.
Yeah.
And I notice you're getting the low disk space. I don't know if that's an issue on your machine.
That is not.
Okay.
That is the Linux. That is Windows thinking my Linux partition is too small.
Okay.
It did successfully create the event. Apparently, no, this doesn't look right. Let's start over.
Thing is, are you using Chrome? Yeah, you're using Chrome. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to my backup version. Okay. Okay. That's cool. Any ideas what's going on now?
Do you want to try to run it from the bin file? Maybe the direct directory?
Yeah, I can try that.
Because maybe the syntax is incorrect.
See if it. I don't know if I can even run this. Hey, that worked. So as you all can see, there's still some bugs to be worked out. Okay, so we're back here. Test meet 1, test league meet. Okay, that's what should have happened the first time. And in my testing before, that is what happened. I'm not entirely sure why that didn't work. This brings you to the dashboard for the event. If you were planning to use live scoring, this is where you could come in and create the default accounts. You just come in here, generate random accounts. And remember these, you can get back to this later, but these are basically the accounts that you would have to give to the referee along with the passwords. My strong recommendation, especially for League Meet 1, is don't worry about live scoring. Don't attempt to add that complexity. Just do the paper scoring and what we've done in previous years. Once your volunteers have a little bit more experience and feel more comfortable, both in the reffing role as well as the score system role, then we can start exploring adding in the live scorekeeping. But in my opinion, that is added complexity that's not necessary at the early league meets. So once you've done that, you can come in here and manage leagues. I'm just going to say add a new league code. This is the test league. We are in Iowa. And I believe League City can be left blank since most of our leagues cover quite large areas and not really one city. And this worked when I tested before. So then you're going to click this Create League button, and that gives you an option now to add remove teams from the league. So we'll click that, and then you can add leagues here. So, you know, Combustible Lemons, for example, it's Waukee. Anyway, put in your leagues here, and the team should come in. If they don't, we'll cover how to fix that in a moment, but they should come in correctly with the correct team name, city, all this information. Once you've added all the teams for your league, and that is all the teams for your league, not just the teams that are there that week. So if, for example, one of your teams can't make it to the League Meet 1, you will still add them into the league, and then in a moment you just won't add them to this event. So that's an important gotcha that probably there's a way to resolve, but it's easier just to add all the teams from the league on the first week. Click Done, and then we see currently 4 teams in league. We'll go back to the league list, and we see our test league is here. Go back to the event dashboard, and now, so that's to add teams to the league. What we next need to do is add teams to the event. So we'll come in here, and this is where if a team wasn't able to make it to an event, or for whatever reason a team could not make it through inspection or not going to be allowed to compete during matches, you just wouldn't check this box here. So we'll say add all to event. That added all these teams. Now, a couple of these teams, you know, let's say the Combustible Lemons changed their team name. So I would come over here to add individually, and I can click this edit button, and that allows me to change this to something better. And I hope Noah appreciates that. Click done. And if I come back and look, that didn't update, but in theory it updates somewhere. I don't think that's
you have to push the save button when you're done editing. You forgot to push the you edited, but you forgot to save it.
There's a save button here. Click save button, and now that's fixed. Now we click done. So, you know, that's basically starting up, setting up the event, getting it ready. Of course, at this point, this is when you would be doing all of your inspections. Once all the inspections are done, all the teams are past inspections, and only at that time, that is when it's time to then generate the match schedule. So you'll come down here, create match schedule. We're just going to say default. You can come in here and set the actual time that you're going to start matches at. number of matches for all of the league meets in Iowa. The number of matches is 5, so you just leave that as default. You can preview it if you want. It's going to show this has 5 qualification matches because we only have 4 teams. Once you're ready, click Run Matchmaker. If you have more teams, this will take a little longer, but it shouldn't take more than maybe 30 seconds at most. And we see that we generated 5 qualification matches. This will automatically show the 5-minute break for consecutive matches. One thing to keep in mind is typically we have a lot of very small leagues in Iowa, and I know a lot of times teams don't actually need this 5-minute break. So a little outside of the scope of this, but just a quick reminder, this is not required. The teams can waive their right to this 5-minute break if they don't need it. If they want it, we will give it to them, but they do not have to take this if you want to keep things flowing and all the teams are ready to go. Just a quick aside. So after you've generated the match schedule, you can click and go back to the so Noah, to answer your question, will we need to set up leagues for each meet in that event or in that league? No, that is not. You will be able to import in this data to League Meet 2 and not have to recreate it. Okay. So after you've generated the match schedule, up here at the top, there's Back to Event Home, and that will bring you to this screen, which is the actual home screen to run the event. There's a couple of key things here. First off, we have match schedule with the option to print it. So this is how you would print off the match schedule to give it to the teams. We have ranking list for all the teams in the meet. We also have the results display, the results page. This will update as the matches are scored. And we have the pit display. So if you were displaying in the pits, what you would want to do is bring up this pit display. A lot of times we don't even end up showing this at a lot of league meets just because usually we don't have the ability or the space to do that. But if you are going to do that, this is where you will do that. And I'll cover here in a moment how to actually connect to this from a remote computer. We have league rankings, which is combined for the entire league. And then we have score tracking. So if you are doing live scoring, this is where you would go to get that. As I said, I don't recommend doing the live scoring until you become comfortable with everything else in the system first. Event dashboard will take you back to this screen. Then you have scoring and timer displays at the very bottom. So usually the Scorekeeper computer is also controlling the timer computer on the field. So what you can do is right-click on this, open a new tab. That'll open this in a new tab. And from there, you can select Field Display. We're going to uncheck Show Live Scores, and we'll click Save. And so then you could click and drag this off onto the other monitor and be able to use that as the field timer display. And this is where the timer will show up in a minute. And finally, there's the actual match control page. So this is the page that actually controls running the matches. So from this page, once you're ready to begin, you'll click Load Next Match. And then you can show Preview and randomize the field. So the match timer display, this is what would actually be at the field, is now going to show the dice roll and what that corresponds to for randomization. That allows the referees to then actually perform the randomization. Once you're ready to begin, you can click Show Match, and that will bring up the timer display. If you're doing live scoring, at this point, the referees would be able to choose that they are ready to begin. Once they are ready, both of these will turn green, showing that both the red and blue lines are ready. If you're not doing live scoring, then you just have to pay attention to what's going on the field, make sure you have the thumbs up. So once the field is randomized and ready to go, you can click Start Match. That will start counting down the timer. This is exactly identical to last year. The timer is going to automatically switch from the autonomous to teleop. You don't have to do anything with that. So I'm just going to abort this so we don't wait a long time. So after the match is over, if Skype will let me switch tabs, and assuming that you're not doing live scoring, you would then be able to come here to the Enter Scores tab. From there, you can, set all this however the match ended. And then once you're happy, commit. And then once you're ready for these results to become public and actually be posted to the pit display, you can click Post Results. For the most part, at league meets, I don't think we ever really hold that back. You're just going to click Post Results immediately. And that'll then show up if you have the audience display, and that should also make it visible on the pit display. You can then come back over here to Schedule, and had I actually run this through, Load Next Match would have been green, so I could have selected it, which would have loaded the next match. And then it's just rinse and repeat over and over. So Load Next Match, Randomize Field, Show Match, Start Match. Load Next Match, Randomize, blah, blah, blah. And for each one, come in here and enter scores, commit, post, enter scores, commit, post.
And Jeramie, can I say one thing?
Yes, of course.
One thing you could do with the system is with the audience display, if you'd like, you can actually, instead of selecting field display, if you're doing paperless or paper tracking, you can actually then use an audience display. And when you disable the live scoring, the audience display will actually look just like a timer display, but when you post the results, it should actually show like red wins, blue wins, and it'll also, then display just the timer during the actual match.
That's a good point. So yeah, basically if you come into the same screen we were at before, instead of field display, audience display, again, uncheck, show live scores, save, and so now
one other thing I'll say is, and just this is a cautionary thing, because we've experienced in our testing, most browsers, modern browsers, limit how many sockets you can have or IP connections to a single server or a proxy. And so the developers recommend that for this configuration, if you have a match control page, you have either the audience or field display, but you don't want to have both running because one might not get updated because of browser restrictions, is what I've been told. So
interesting.
And so I actually have an outline in the documentation, and it again says you can choose field or audience. And the one nice thing about the audience display is it will, when you post it, it'll show the results so that it'll say red wins or blue wins, if that's what you'd like to do.
Right. Okay. So we'll just enter one more dummy score here. Let's see if that updated the audience display. Yeah, so that's then the audience display that shows what the actual result was. And then I assume if I go back to show match, this will go back. Yeah, show random then. Anyway, there we go. So that is also an option to do the audience display instead of the field display. So after all of your matches are over, you've scored all of your matches. Obviously, it's a league meet, so we don't have to worry about alliances or anything like that. So click Exit. We'll return to the event dashboard. And then down at the very bottom here, there's this download archive file. Click that. It's going to give you this output file, testbeat1.db. Save that. And this is the file that you will then upload will import into League Meet 2. But the other thing that you can do with this file is if you then go after the event's over, it first inspiresiowa.org. And so once you go into firstinspiresiowa.org, which is the website we're using this year to track all the team information, everything for the entire season, at the very top here, upload event. It's a league meet. Select whatever league you're in. So say it's the Aldrin League. Event date, location. So from here, you can select this export file that you just exported. Click open, continue. And this will then parse that file and import it into the database and also save it so that Becca and I both have access to it. And we have a backup on the cloud in case this file somehow gets lost between League Meet 1 and League Meet 2, for example. So that's the basics for the score system for Meet 1. The only thing that's different for Meet 2 is when you create the new event for Meet 2 and you come in here to manage leagues, you will import it, your event 1 here. So you'll choose file. Curious if this is going to break everything. It is because it's already been imported, but it'll come up and say, oh, it found this league with 4 teams in it, and it found this event. By the time you get to League Meet 4 or 5, it should pull all of the meets in at once, and you'll be able to have all of your data.
And Jeramie, you can expand that little plus on the right-hand side, and they can see those 4 teams. Like it'll show you the content. Oh,
I think it would if it wasn't already.
Oh yeah. In this case, because it's conflicted. Yeah, and the red just indicates that it's duplicate data.
Right, that it already has this data in the system, so it's not going to re-import it. So. I think that's the basics for running a league meet. Like I said, my recommendation, at least for all of your league meet 1s, is to not worry about the complexity of live scoring. Just do it the way we've done it in the past with paper scoring. And then, league meet 2 or 3, when everybody feels more comfortable and the referees feel comfortable, we can then add in live scoring on a league-by-league basis. And if anybody wants help at that time, feel free to reach out to me. I can help go through the actual configuration of the network. Oh, I guess I should show one other thing. So if you want a audience display or pit display not physically tied to the Scorekeeper laptop. So, in the pits over in the cafeteria when the event's running in the gym, for example, or something like that, as long as both computers are on the same network and none of the firewall conflicts with each other, what you can do is open a command prompt. So just go to the start menu, type CMD, enter. I don't know why that keeps hiding. I think that's a Skype thing. But if you can get to a command prompt, you can then type ipconfig. That's it. Sorry, use Linux too much. So if you type in ipconfig, you will then be able to find in here your IPv4 address. So in this case, it's 192.168.1.93. So if I go into a browser connected to the same network, even if it's not the same computer, and type in that IP address. Why are you trying to do this over HTTPS? It should. I don't know why it's trying to do this with SSL. Oh, because. Anyway, it should work. It may just be some weird error with the fact that I'm running it on my same computer. Or I got something else running in the background. that's what it should come up with on the other computer. So it won't have the dashboard or any of that type of stuff, but what it does have is the pit display and the match results, all this stuff. So if you want to put the pit display up on another computer, this is how you would do it. There is documentation in the on the GitHub. There's currently the draft Scorekeeper manual that does walk through the process of how to set that up. And I believe there's going to be a change to make the IP address more visible here, so you don't have to look it up in the command window.
Yes, we're going to try and make it like somewhere pretty obvious so that it's more intuitive.
So is there any questions that anybody has?
I guess the question is for this software, you just have one computer that does everything. You don't have a computer that runs the matches and another one that we just put scores in, correct?
Correct. There's one computer that's running both the timer on the field as well as entering scores, which means that the person entering the scores also has to run the field timer. That is something we have done at a few events in the past in Iowa, but I know usually we try to separate out those two roles. As we transition the state over to live scoring, it'll be less of a concern because then really the person sitting at that computer is only responsible for starting the matches. But in this transition, it'll be a little tricky.
And Ed, if you really would like to do that mode where you have one for just running the match and one for scoring, it is possible. And the way you would do that is you need to, you would have two machines. One of them would run the software, and you can decide if you want that to be either the match control or if it's one for entering data. And then on the second computer, you would connect with that IP address, and then you'd log in with one of those default user accounts that Jeramie showed you how to generate as part of the steps in the event dashboard. And you pick the one that has, if you click on default accounts, you see the first one that says test meet event admin. That one has event admin access, and that would allow that person, I believe, to then go to the match control and enter in the scores, so that while one person is running the match from the match control, the other one could be entering in the scores. But you just have to be careful to make sure that, because they'll be on the same page, like one person doesn't actually push the button to start the second match while the other one's editing. But I think that should work. But if there's a strong desire to do that, we can take it offline and I can help, configure that and we can test it. It hasn't been a test scenario that we tested carefully, but in theory it should work.
Are there any other questions?
Yes. Could you show how to do that PowerShed port thing again real quick? You went real quick on that. I didn't get it wrote down.
Oh, to open at a different port? Yeah, so what you'll do is basically, are we getting, Tom, is this irrelevant? Is this going to be fixed in 0.5.0?
I think so. The other thing is it might be that what worked before, I don't know if you noticed, there might be, oh no, that's correct. Yeah, I don't know. With the ports, that's something we could talk to you about afterwards. I'm not sure how we want to approach it. Yeah, yeah. The issue is that because of the reasons we stated and other reasons, like if you don't have sufficient administrative privileges on Windows, or if there's a firewall or some other software running, or if you have another instance of the server, you might not be able to get access to the default port, which is 80. And we're not sure how we will handle that. We've discussed different strategies, and that's something we wanted to talk to Jeramie about as well. But yeah, if that's an issue, then I believe the batch file lets you launch it with an alternate port.
It should, yeah. Is that in? You could also just come in here to First Tech Challenge. So let me do that a little slower. So when you open up the zip archive and go in here, if you right-click on this .bat file, the Windows version, and say Edit, you should be able to come in here and add -P for port 8080. And then just save that file and then double-click on it, and that should work.
Do you have to run that as administrator maybe? Because if you right-click on it, I don't know if you noticed that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, if you have administrator, you could also run as administrator and see if that fixes the issue.
And I appreciate everyone's patience with it. I mean, it is a new system, and if you have time and we meet in Iowa or at a championship event, I can tell you the backstory. But I do appreciate it. The team that's worked on it has worked hard, and we think it's a good product, but it's still relatively new. And although we have tested it fairly extensively, we know that there are some issues with it. So. And we will have live event support, and myself and the actual developers will be on call so that Becca can distribute the number. But it's an event call, and if you get a voicemail message, it's probably because we're talking to somebody else, but we'll call back as soon as we can. And in most cases, you'll actually get a live person to answer the phone.
And there's a number of us in Iowa that have been feverishly trying to learn as much as we can about the system over the course of the last week. And we're trying to spread ourselves out as much as possible. So hopefully, at least for League Meet 1, every league in the state will have somebody that has some experience with it. That's going to be tricky because there's a lot of events, not this weekend, but next weekend. But we're going to try to cover as many as possible. So hopefully you'll have somebody at your event who has some experience with the system.
And if I could just make a plug for the documentation, Jeramie did point to the releases page, and we do have a document, and it's being updated, but it does cover everything Jeramie had, and it is somewhat dense because there is a lot of information, but it's a good reference, and also it's good to look at it and maybe just skim it, because it does cover a lot of the things that he talked about and more. And in the section where it talks about the scorekeeping for a league event, it describes a more complex league where you might have parallel events for the same league. And the protocol or process that's defined there can be used. But in the case of a simple event where you have a league meet, but you don't have the same league playing in two different events at the same time, then the outline or the process that Jeramie outlined is workable and is recommended as well, although it's not documented in here. So, but the document does try to cover all of those scenarios, as well as it also talks about how the mechanics of how you set up your displays and how you set up your event within the match control. Within the scoring system user interface.
So do you think, is it in the past we always use a monitor for the timing system so they can see the timer? Is it better to have it on a big screen now with this system?
It's really your call. What Jeramie proposes is perfectly fine. And in that case, you might have like a laptop with a monitor connected through an HDMI port, and one of the small screen might be running the match control window, and then you expand the other browser window to display either the field or audience display. That's probably, for instance, what we'll do in New Hampshire, because it's a small event. And it's your call. I mean, you can do it on a bigger monitor, but as long as the teams can see it, if you want to provide that display also for audience. But at the same time, if you've traditionally done a small monitor field side, you can continue to do that. You do have options if you're okay with it. If you have the resources, you can also set up another laptop or another computer to display audience display only. But then that gets more complicated because you need to have some kind of network to connect all of those machines. So in the most basic configuration, we recommend having a single laptop with an external monitor, and then you can decide, how big that monitor is and where you place it. Yeah, and Jeramie has scrolled to the page where there's some, these are just, they're not set in stone. They're just more recommendations or examples to give people ideas on how they might want to set up their field display or computers.
So are there any other questions?
I think someone might be typing a message on the chat box.
Yeah.
Dave. Yep.
So what will the ref screen look like on the field? It will look... Let me close out of a couple of these things. So if you come to Alliance score tracking, there's one for each color. Right now, match Q1 is loaded. So if I click on this and let's so it'll look something like and a little sleep response. Something like this is what you'll see on the tablet at the field. So you can come in here, say if they're no-show, if they latched or not, and then once they're ready, you'll click ready. I may have already closed out of the... I don't think I did. It's probably because that match is no longer loaded.
And if I may, David, while Jeramie's just getting that setup back, and what it'll do is it gives you the user interface. So once the match is queued up, and after they've entered the pre-match information, which he showed you, once the match begins, it'll actually show an electronic version of the score sheet, which allows them for the autonomous phase to score the specific autonomous tasks. And then after that phase is complete, they have the ability to submit the scores, and then it transitions, to the driver-controlled phase. And as that driver control phase starts, they can enter in the score values through the user interface. And then once that's complete, they can submit it, and then they have a chance to do a final review, and then they submit it, and then the scorekeeper says, hey, I got the scores from both referees, and then they can, either edit it or just commit them and post them.
Yeah, so, basically once you've done that, it says wait for match to start. And then when the match actually starts, so it shows this autonomous page, and you can now start scoring during the autonomous phase. It won't let you submit autonomous until the end of autonomous, so we'll give it a...
Now, will you have to put the scores in before the next match starts?
No, they're decoupled, so that was a big requirement. So what happens is, let's say you have a match and you complete it, and all of the referees enter their driver-controlled and autonomous data, but they haven't done their final review. And let's say there's a dispute. Then the match controller or the scorekeeper should have the ability to play the next match. So they can load it, do the randomization, wait for the other referees, like assuming, let's say you had 2 fields or something like that. Or you can have the referees, I guess with their tablets, if you only had 2 referees scoring, they can move on to the next match. And then later on, you can revisit it and commit the previous match after the resolution has been made. Okay, red team gets this many points. And then you can post the results later. So if you were playing match 1 and it got finished as far as the actual play, but there's some dispute over the score, the match controller should be able to queue up and run match 2 and then revisit match 1 later on and then edit it or commit it if it's been already agreed upon and then post the results. So they should be decoupled.
And here's what it actually looks like if anybody's curious.
Another question is, let's say something happens, you push the button too early and it starts early. Can you stop it and restart that match?
Yes, there's an abort button here, and then you would just be able to re-randomize if necessary, and then start the match again.
Now I'm going to go back to my last question about if you're putting the scores in manually, like we're going to be doing at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to put those scores in before you go to the next match, or can you do that like as the second match is going on?
No, you can put in any score at any time just by going to the edit tab or the edit button here.
Okay.
So you could actually enter scores for matches that haven't even been played. So here you can actually also see what the live score version is if you click on view, because these haven't been committed yet. So I'm just going to say submit. Gives the head referee a chance to look over everything before submitting final score. Do the same for the Red Alliance. And now this became editable, and if we look over here, we can see we can now commit this and post this. But so at this point, say we're running match 2, but we need to go back and change the score on match 1 because something was missed or something. You can go back and edit a score that's already been saved and recommit it, and basically anything you need to do that way.
And just to give you the background on this, this is developed by some folks, some volunteers in North Carolina, but it's based on a system that they had used for 2 seasons last year and the year before in North Carolina. So, but they basically took it and rewrote it and incorporated improvements based on feedback from us from late season use last year. And one of the things that we suggested strongly was exactly what folks have been asking on this call. Can you run these things independently? Because it used to be linear or sequential, and you couldn't go to match 2, for instance, unless you finish match 1. But with this software, that is not the case. You have, as Jeramie was demonstrating, the independent nature, and you can only have one active match at a time. That's the one that's being displayed on all the displays, field and audience. But at the same time, you can simultaneously or out of sequence edit the matches and update and then recommit.
Are there any further questions?
Jeramie, was my mic okay? Because I just realized sometimes it rubs on my shirt because it hangs low, and I apologize if it was making noise through this.
You sounded fine to me. I didn't hear any outside noise.
Because I forget that sometimes, and people are saying, like, is there something like, and it's this microphone, it hangs low by my shirt, so it rubs against it.
Well, if there's no further questions, Becca, do you want to take back control? Thanks, Jerry.
That was Noah.
Oh, was that Noah?
Yeah.
Sounded like Jerry. So I think that's all I had. Becca, do you have any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. Is there any last questions that people might have? Okay, well, thank you everybody for participating today. If there's no other last questions, we're going to go ahead and stop the recording and send it out to everybody. So thank you and have a great evening.